welcome Larry Savage, the next chairman of Cobb County. Larry, good evening.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm glad to be here. We're going to talk about Cobb County tonight, touch on some interesting subjects that have to do with current issues and some larger philosophical questions about government in general, if we can. So I'll put it in your hands to pick a topic and we'll take off on it.
Tell me why you're a candidate for Cobb chairman.
You know, that's a very good question, and I was asked today in an interview by a newspaper person why I would be a candidate this year after having already not succeeded as a candidate. And I said, well, it's simply because the issue in this campaign is the current incumbent chairman. And the problem was that there wasn't anybody else coming forward to run against him. And a lot of people felt very strongly that he needed to be put out to pasture. I really thought that there would be maybe a horse race for people coming out of the woodwork to run against the chairman, and it just didn't happen. And finally, we got to the end of December, and time was running short to launch a campaign, and I had to make a decision. I said, well, we're not going to let another 4-year term get started without somebody making this into a race, and I'm going to do that.
What hasn't the chairman done that you want to do differently?
Well, I think maybe it's more of a question of what he has done and some of the things that he has done. Paramount would be the financial issues. We have seen an increase in county's annual spending. Annual spending has increased more than $100 million in the chairman's term, and he's not done yet. This term has still got months to go. And because of that, we got a massive tax increase, or by any terms it would be considered massive, because it's a 25% or more than a 25% increase in the millage rate. Now that is on top of 3 previous years of steadily rising increases in the assessed value of all the property, and probably going to be another across-the-board increase in property values this year. So there's an organic increase or growth in the revenue going to the county, and then that 25% millage increase right on top of it. Those are big deals. It's unprecedented, and I think indefensible.
Well, for $100 million, I've heard the county chairman talk about 5-star county. What have we gotten for that $100 million that you think makes us a 5-star county?
I don't know how you count your stars when you're a county government, but I can tell you this. I have lived in Cobb County since 1976, and it was an extremely attractive place to live when I moved here in 1976. It continued to be an extremely attractive place, and if 5 stars is the most you can get, I would say it was a 5-star county then. It didn't become less than a 5-star county in recent years, and Mr. Chairman is the only one I know of who felt like it needed to be elevated. So the claim that it was his mission to promote us to a higher level, I think was really kind of a false claim.
We've had a lot of people unhappy lately with the amount of development that's gone on in certain parts of the county, and the fact that it seems to be almost unchecked. What would you do differently?
Well, you know, development was our middle name here for decades in Cobb County. You know, a lot of people can tell you if you go back to the 50s and 60s, it was dirt roads, not much more than dirt roads. But we had tremendous development boom in the 70s in East Cobb, and it has continued. We've had development going on all the time. The problem is when you start to run out of space to develop, it makes it a little more difficult. Now we start to see people come in and want to do more vertical developments, building high-rise apartment buildings, high-rise condos, things of that nature. And that is where we start to get into real trouble, because when you add the people intensity of high-rise living, you start to have trouble with all your infrastructure. Your transportation is probably the greatest one. The school district is always going to be under pressure because you've got a lot more people coming in than anticipated. And I think the high-rise development boom is one that needs to be short-lived, because it's going to create a lot of long-term problems for us if we're not very careful about controlling it.
One of the byproducts of that kind of density building is traffic, and there's questions of local traffic and regional traffic. And what are your thoughts on the subject?
We hear something occasionally about regionalism and the desire to have regional transportation planning, and even the desire to connect with MARTA. we can do our part and be a good regional partner on planning with other agencies and other communities around us. That's not really a problem, but we don't have to sell out our sovereignty in order to do that. We can do what's best for the people of Cobb County and still be a good planning partner for all the jurisdictions around us. Traffic is a problem, going to be a problem, and we have to be sure that, first of all, we don't make it any worse than necessary, and secondly, that we spend wisely when we put our resources to bear on trying to mitigate traffic congestion. There are always so many tempting ways to spend money on transportation that really don't do anything for transportation. We got to put that temptation aside and focus on doing the things like road building, road improvements, the things that will do something about the traffic. 97, 98, 99% of commuters commute in cars, and like it or not, most of them are single occupant cars, and it's going to keep being that way, and we have to prepare for it and plan accordingly.
We are running into budgetary issues like every other county right now, in the country as well. We've heard the chairman say that we're well protected because of our reserves. What's your thoughts on use of reserves?
You know, that discussion comes up because of the COVID-19 crisis, or I refer to it as the COVID panic. It's hurting the economy. It's going to continue to hurt the economy. And when you hurt the economy, you hurt Cobb County government, because we've got a lot of revenue sources besides property taxes that are going to be adversely affected and are being adversely affected by the slowdown in the economy and the all-out stoppage of some business activity. When you look at things like hotel taxes, the $3 a night hotel taxes on hotels around the Cumberland area, construction projects, the permitting fees, inspection fees, all that sort of thing, all of that is being greatly reduced, if not stopped altogether. So the county's revenue is going to be hurt. Now, it's good to have reserves. We should have reserves. I'm happy that we have reserves, but that's not the first thing you call on to deal with a slowing economy. The first thing you have to do is tighten your belt, eliminate any possible waste, and start to look for ways to downsize and match your operating expenses to the amount of revenue that you can realistically expect. We shouldn't see much loss in property taxes this year because property valuations are based upon January 1st of the year, so that's behind us. Next year, though, could be a different matter. If the economic slowdown continues, we could see a reduction, at least in the rate of increase in property values, if not an outright reduction in property values, and that will really kill county finances. So we've got to be tightening our belt and not burn our reserves right off the bat.
Annexation is another hot topic for some people, and also the effects of annexation. And what are your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, you know, I looked around one day. I was looking for a map of the city of Marietta from years ago, and I couldn't find what I wanted. But I did come to appreciate the fact that the city of Marietta covers a lot of territory. The city of Smyrna covers a lot of territory, and they're talking about a big expansion of the city limits. Kennesaw, Ackworth, they're all big. Only the other two are not showing an enormous amount of spread on the map. So, you know, we have to be concerned about that. Usually when one of the cities annexes neighboring unincorporated parts of Cobb County, more often than not, it's because a developer wants to develop something that the county won't allow. So they want to get annexed into the city so that the city will then allow them to do what they want to do. Well, unfortunately, when that happens, the neighborhood around that objectionable development are still affected. It's just they have lost their ability to contest it because it's not their government that's doing it. And we saw one like that in East Cobb on the Lower Rosa Road to South Loop recently, where there's going to be a multi-story apartment project right in the middle of a single-family residential area, and it was only going to happen because the city of Marietta was going to annex the area and give the developer what he wanted for zoning. Fortunately, the community around there got up in arms, and they successfully objected to it, not just to the county, but to the city of Marietta, and the whole project was abandoned. I'm glad that it was, for the sake of that neighborhood.
There's an awful lot of talk about how do you keep taxes down and still provide quality services. What are your thoughts on that?
Taxes increase in two ways, basically. We're talking about property taxes primarily. That's the biggest part of the county's revenue stream. property taxes depend upon the valuation of the property, and all the property together in Cobb County, that's referred to as the tax digest. The tax digest tends to increase over time because any new development or new construction is added to it, and that value is added to it. And also over time, property values tend to increase naturally due to basic inflation, and also because your area is attractive and other people will come in and pay good prices to live there. So we have the increase in the tax digest value, but the other part is the millage rate. Now, most jurisdictions around metropolitan Atlanta over the last 3 or 4 years have been very pleased with the organic growth of their revenue stream based upon rising property values. Cobb County had rising property values 3 years in a row. Where we got into trouble and really started to offend people, increasing the millage rate. The millage rate is the big wallop when it comes to tax increases, and our big wallop on our millage rate was just over 25% above the previous millage rate. That's too much, it's excessive, it's indefensible.
If I was a Cobb County employee or a retired Cobb County employee, I'd be worried about my pension right now. Can you explain what's going on with that and how you might help to change that?
You know, you would be right to be concerned about that. Everybody should be concerned about it. The pension plan, we all knew, I think, that it was underfunded, but only recently when I began to really delve into it, I discovered in dollar terms how much it's so underfunded. There are two pieces. One is the pension plan itself, and the other is what they call OPEB, other post-employment benefits. The combination of those two things together is underfunded by $860 million. And furthermore, I said earlier that the county's spending had increased more than $100 million in Mr. Boyce's term. Well, the underfunded status of the pension obligations also grew by more than $100 million in that same period. So we got a double whammy there. That problem is not going away, and until we have got to turn the light on and do everything we can to mount an aggressive push to get that pension plan under control.
I want to talk just a little bit about a very controversial subject. It applies only to one section of the county, but it's a very hot subject in East Cobb, and that is the city of East Cobb. And what are your thoughts about what that plan is right now and your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, as you know, I'm running for the chairman of the county commission, and the chairman of the county commission has zero influence over how that turns out. The people who are promoting the city of East Cobb have all the influence over it, and their job is to put together a case that they can put in front of the voters and let the voters decide if they want to become a city or not. Throughout that process, the county remains silent because it does not pass through the county government to make that decision. One thing I would do as chairman, I would have the county cooperate with them and give them information so that they would have reliable information for their presentation and not have to make numbers up, which I think is kind of what happened in the past. That also goes for the proposed city of South Cobb. If they want to go that way and their people are wanting to go that way, have at it, but the county government really doesn't have anything to say about it.
One of the other subjects that we've had to deal with lately is another one, and unfortunately it is in East Cobb as well, and that's a new establishment that proposes to go up on Johnson Ferry Road called Tokyo Valentino.
Well, I'm glad you can remember the name. I can't, and maybe it's not accidental that I can't remember the name. It's one I'd like to force out of my head because of what I've heard about the company behind it and their other stores that carry the same name now. I don't know exactly what to say about it because the information that has come out in public has been sort of mixed and inconclusive. One news article said that we couldn't contact this person associated with it, couldn't contact another person, couldn't contact another person, and the people we did contact said they didn't know anything about it. So it's the information is very inadequate right now, but if it's at all connected with what we've heard about the stores by the same name, particularly the one in Atlanta, it is absolutely appalling that such a thing would show up in East Cobb. East Cobb has zoning and development ordinances in place, and there are extensive sections in there that specifically deal with adult entertainment. And we need to get those things out, update them if necessary, and pull out the big guns. We should not be at all willing to cooperate and tolerate this thing in East Cobb if it's anything like what we currently are seeing in other locations with that same name.
When you become chairman on January 1st,
Sometime early January.
early January, what will be some of the first things that you do as chairman?
You know, one of the things that's different about government from business, business is under pressure all the time. If you're in a business operation, you're always under pressure to make money. That's how business survives. It has to make money in order to survive. So you're constantly, your success or failure is being measured by your profits or lack of them. Government doesn't have that kind of pressure. So it's not common for government to really have serious reviews of their operation to see if they're getting all their investment back out of them, to see if they're getting the benefits that they should be getting. So I like to do a top-down review of every department in the county government. Look at what is your mission, who are your people, who are your constituents, who are your customers that you serve, how do you serve them, how do you measure success, and what does it cost you to do that? I think that kind of an evaluation of every department would be entirely appropriate, probably long overdue. You got to get to know these things. As it's been said many times, you can't manage what you can't measure. I don't think you can measure that what you don't recognize. So you got to get to know it.
I've heard you say that you think budget should be built from the bottom up and not the top down. What does that mean?
You know, a lot of people talk about zero-based budgeting, but every time I've heard somebody talk about that, they use it's kind of a buzzword that doesn't necessarily resonate well. I mean that you look at every dollar in a budget. You don't just take last year's spending and add 10% or whatever. That's not how you do a budget. You look at what they spent last year, how they spent it, what you got back out of it. You know, it shouldn't be assumed that everybody's budget goes up every year. I've been in places where your budget goes down sometimes for various circumstances, but you ought to be prepared for that and prepared to come in and make a reasonable request and be prepared to defend it.
We've certainly taken a big hit in hotel motel taxes around the stadium. How does that impact the county, and how's that going to impact them next year?
There are two kinds of hotel motel taxes. One is 8% tax charged against the room rate, and that one is county-wide. I understand that we have like 3 hotels in the county that are fully occupied by National Guard people. I don't know why that is or which one it is, but all the others are really at the bottom of the barrel as far as their occupancy. So that hotel rate, or that hotel tax is definitely going to be way down, and that's the larger of the hotel taxes. And then we have the $3 a night hotel tax for the hotels just in the area around Cumberland. And that money is supposed to come in and help the debt payment on the stadium. Well, those things have got to be down near zero as well, because nobody's traveling these days. No business travel, very little vacation travel, and those hotels can't possibly have great occupancy. In fact, I read in the newspaper about hotel chains laying off thousands of people. So that's got to be down near zero. And hotel motel tax in a time like this is probably about the last place you want to be relying on for funding.
So who's obligated to pay the payments on this $400 million worth of debt on the Brave Stadium?
You know, as you know, I was deeply involved in that, and I'm very familiar with the contracts involved. And I can tell you one phrase that I have read over and over and over again in all the documents that sticks in my head, and it's that the guarantee for the payment on the debt belongs to the taxpayers in Cobb County. I believe the terminology is something like based on the pledge of the Board of Commissioners of Cobb County to tax an ad valorem tax on all the real property in Cobb County at whatever rate is necessary to meet the obligation. So in contractual terms, the payment on that debt is actually outranks everything else the county does.
Where will that money come from?
Well, it's going to come from the taxpayers.
Well,
there isn't anywhere else. I mean, you know, the other fees and things that counties collects, you know, like 30% of the total spending, the total budget, those things are all down right now. So, you know, if we can't either tighten our belt or get back in charge and get back in the road with our economic growth, that's going to be a burden that's going to land on us.
Will it come out of the reserves that Chairman Boyce keeps talking about?
I hope not, because you've got reserves for a purpose. They're reserves. That's not the first thing you use when the economy turns down. You know the economy's turning down, And when you know it in advance, it's not a surprise, and you have to dial back your expenses accordingly. You do what ordinary homeowners do. If you're used to making a living off commissions or overtime or something like that, and you find out that all at once you're not making commissions, you're not making overtime, you still got a job, what do? You cut back on your spending. You don't go out to dinner as much, things like that. Well, the county has to do the same thing. They got to be tightening their belt right now, and they're not doing it.
How would you have them do it if you were chairman right now?
You got to look at everything. First thing you do is the obvious stuff. You freeze hiring. You don't hire anybody. You don't replace anybody that leaves. Attrition becomes your friend because you're reducing your payroll. You can't be hired back to replace everybody that leaves at a time like that. But I was reading today an article that suggested that the state of Georgia, their budget losses are so great. Some of the legislators are talking about across-the-board pay cuts for everybody who works for state government. Now, I hate to see something like that happen, but at some point you've got to recognize reality, and you've got to size your operation to fit what you can afford.
There's a $132 million stimulus that's for the COVID effects that came to Cobb County. What are your thoughts on how that money is being spent?
You know what? I'm not going to get into an extensive discussion about that because it's very sensitive. One of the top things that they've already approved money, I think, for some food distribution. They've got a plan today to help people with overdue rent. And then, of course, they've got the plan for the $50 million in grants to small businesses. I have a different view of what the law says you can do with that money. And I don't have enough influence to change the direction the county's going in. So I'll just keep my mouth shut on that subject and watch it play out.
Well, there's certainly worthy causes. It's just a question of that's where the money is legally allowed to be spent.
That's exactly right. That's what makes it troublesome. There are worthy causes, but if they're illegal, they're illegal. And the reason that's a big problem, if the county runs through this money and does things with it that aren't allowed, at the end of the year, they're going to have to explain that. And if the Treasury Department comes in here and says, wait a minute, you misused all the money, you got to pay us back. Well, where are we going to get that money? Well, back to being you taxpayer again. So I think it's vital that they make darn sure everything they're doing is only up and up, and that it meshes not with just some Washington lobbyist view of the world, but find somebody that's connected to the Treasury Department and maybe call somebody in Congress, and find out if this is permissible use. And frankly, I don't see it that way.
One of the themes of your campaign is transparency and accountability. And why do you see that as a problem right now? Because the chairman certainly says that he's the most transparent and accountable chairman that we've ever seen. I guess you have a difference of opinion.
Well, I'll give you an example. Today, I was watching a meeting that the commissioners had this morning with staff to go through the agenda for their business meeting this afternoon. And one of the commissioners said something about, well, wait a minute, we're talking about something that only exists on an email that you, sir, the chairman, sent out to all the commissioners. The public doesn't have this information. How do they know what we're talking about? How do they know what's going on? And I think that happens all the time. There's stuff that gets transpired, and we don't. You can say, well, you can make an open records request. Well, you can't make an open records request if you don't know there's a record. And I think a lot of things get done that way. There's some things in this agenda this week that make no sense whatever to me, and it's not because I don't follow the government. I do. They make no sense because they make no sense. There's so little information provided that I don't know what they're talking about. So there you go.
Now, there seems to be a great way to skirt open records and public discussion, and that's called the consent agenda. And how would that change under you?
You know what? I think you'd have to do away with the consent agenda for a while and force people to talk about every item until they decide that maybe we'll comply with the consent agenda and do it right for a while. Ever since I first began to watch Cobb government, I've seen things go into consent agenda that were very, very iffy, and clearly somebody was trying to slip something through unnoticed. But it's worse now than I've ever seen it.
Would you explain how the consent agenda works?
Sure. You're supposed to discuss, Robert's Rules of Order. You make a motion to approve item ABC, and you have discussion about ABC, and then you vote on ABC, and it passes or fails. The consent agenda, you have Project ABC and Project DEF and Project GHI and all the other projects in the alphabet. They go into one basket, and that's the consent agenda. You vote on the basket full of projects all at once with no discussion.
They're discussed elsewhere, but they're just not discussed in public, is that right?
Well, some of it is, it's intended for things that are so ordinary they wouldn't be controversial to anybody, and you officially you've got to have a vote on them, but there's no real reason to have a discussion about it. Everybody knows what it is. But these things that are going into consent agenda now are not so ordinary that anybody understands them, and in many cases I absolutely believe it's to try to get them through without any discussion so the public never gets a look.
I've heard you say that if the chairman had only lived up to his campaign promises, you wouldn't be running this year.
You're exactly right. I'd be at home in my workshop right now, in fact. I have a number of things I'd like to be working on, but I have a great affection for Cobb County. It's been good to me. It's my home for many, many years now. It's been a great home to a lot of people. And I think it's important that we get back on track, we stay out of the ditch in the future. And frankly, the current chairman is the issue in this campaign. He really needs to be removed and replaced, and I want to get in that job and put some guardrails in for the county government to live with so that the possibility of steering out of the road completely is greatly diminished in the future.
Are the rules already there in place and it's just a question we're not following them, or do the rules need to be changed?
Oh, not only the rules. I mean, we've got places where state law is applicable but not followed. And I know what some people are going to say. Some people say, well, if it's illegal, they can't do that. Well, yes, they can, because if it's illegal and they do it anyway, it is very difficult to do anything about it. Very difficult. And unless somebody violates a criminal statute, or a statute like the Open Meetings Act or the Open Records Act, which is directed toward county government, unless they violate something like that, it's very difficult to bring an action to get anybody to comply. I mean, I've been down that road, and I can tell you how hard it is.
You're certainly a citizen activist, and how have the open records access changed for you during the course of this chairmanship?
Well, not totally coincident with this chairmanship, the Cobb County open records mechanism is actually pretty good. It's been stepped up to basically a computer control deal now, where you can, once you're in, you get an identity and everything, and you can go in and out and make requests very easily. The problem, though, is that the records suddenly that you want are not available, or they don't come out in a timely manner, or the worst thing, and I think something that's been abused a little bit, is that the law allows the government to charge you to cover the cost of generating records if that cost is excessive. In the past, the only thing I ever paid for was $3 or $4 for a couple of blank DVDs that the data came on. Now, I made one open records request and they wanted almost $400 just to complete the request that I wanted, because it would take so much time out of somebody's day and so much effort to assemble the information I wanted. I thought that information, I won't tell you what it was, I thought that information should be right on the top of somebody's desk. And they said it wasn't, and I said I'm not paying $400, so I didn't get it.
So you'll figure out a way to get it back to where it's affordable for the general public to get access.
I think that the county should be making a special effort to comply with open records requests, but moreover, the county should be making a special effort to provide information that a reasonable person would know that the public would like to have.
You had a recommendation, and I'd like you to reiterate it, about how the county might help the city of Marietta, especially the square, jumpstart their activities there when it came with respect to parking.
Well, I was actually on a social media platform, and somebody asked, well, what can we do to get business going again in our community? And I said, well, one idea in the city of Marietta is we could open up the county's parking garages for free parking after hours and on weekends, the way it used to be. Before our chairman came in and declared it to be a problem and implemented a rate forecast to charge people to park at night and on weekends. It kind of blew the party apart on that. And I think that would be a very nice thing for the county to do, to allow a little new traffic to arrive in Marietta and people not to be deterred by the cost of parking.
It would certainly seem like the city would be very open to that, and it's one of those things that doesn't cost a lot of money, but could make a big difference.
It is, and I'll tell you how serious it is. Maybe a year ago, the Marietta City Council was having discussions about putting parking meters in around the square, on the square itself and the street surrounding it. And they finally decided to not do that because it would be bad for the businesses on the square. And I agree with them. Well, shortly after that is when Cobb County said, oh, no more free parking. Well, then the city went to, they're still having discussions about building their own parking garage, just to have places for people to park when they want to come to visit the square. And I'm thinking, you know, it just doesn't make sense that the county's got all this parking facility over there, and over a cheapskate view of charging for parking, they want to, you know, not cooperate with the city and help boost the fortunes of the square.
That seems to be ways where you can make money and not cost yourself very much money at the same time. And
well,
good
yeah,
for the county.
You know, government has to serve, and every once in a while, I mean, government does a lot of stuff that costs money that they don't charge anything for. And this parking deck thing, I think. Now, of course, we've got a problem now. Now we've got a parking contractor that runs the thing, and they're guaranteed a certain amount of profit. So if we open up free parking, we may end up having to write a bigger check to our contractor. Why we would need a contractor to run a parking garage that employs 2 people is beyond me, but that's okay.
There seems to be a lot of consultants in Cobb County. It's a good way to keep them off the employee ranks, but you're also providing expertise when you need it and not having it on deck all the time. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, there's a place for consultancies, but I personally think it's a little overused. I know when Commissioner Ott has used county staff to do some things in his district with these corridor plans that would otherwise have been done by contractors, consultants who would produce nothing better at a lot greater cost. So there's an example of where somebody did try to be a little bit innovative and use the talented people that are already on the payroll. But this thing now with the COVID money from the federal government in the CARES Act, all the money they're giving away is going through various consultants or interest groups or whatever to actually handle the dispersal of the money, something county personnel could easily do. But even today, some of the commissioners said, well, we don't want to have to make those decisions about who gets the money and who doesn't. And I'm thinking to myself, is that really what you're supposed to be doing? Shouldn't you be making that call and not farming it out?
Did I see that they were farming out a $500,000 contract for the small businesses?
The small businesses
Should handle that?
Yeah, it's $50 million, and they're going to pay their partner on it $500,000 as administrator.
And their partner is
the Cobb Chamber of Commerce.
Cobb Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of money. And certainly they would do a good job, and small businesses certainly need help around here. If that's a use of that money that's legal, that sure seems like a lot of money, though, to be paying a consultant to dish it out.
Yeah, but I wasn't a party to that deal, so I guess we'll have to take what we have.
That's right. Things will be different someday. Well, we're going to wrap this up, but how would you like to just finish this evening with the community and just tell them what you're going to do next for this place?
Well, the next thing we're going to do, the election comes up in 2 weeks from today, as a matter of fact, on June the 9th, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to turn voters our way between now and then. There's a possibility, we're working on a plan right now, there's a possibility we may actually try to have a live event before then. You know, this year for election campaigns, it's been the most bizarre thing anybody's ever seen. You know, the staples of campaigning, the door-to-door canvassing and the fundraising events and parties and things like that are all verboten now, so we can't do it. You got to think of new ways. But now we're starting to loosen up a little bit, and maybe we'll have an opportunity. One of the big wild cards is that a lot of people have voted with absentee ballots, and we know thousands and thousands of absentee ballots have already been voted in return, but there's still going to be a large cadre of people who will vote on election day, as they always do. I know people who take pride in that, and they'll be there on June 9th to count their ballot in person, even if they have to go to a strange polling place because theirs isn't open. There's a possibility all the polling places may not be open because they don't have enough people to man them all. So we got to watch that, and we're going to make the best of it. We want to make the best of this campaign. I want to get elected chairman. This is not to be elected chairman. This is a nominating election to nominate a nominee who will be the Republican representative on the ballot in November to compete with Democrat Lisa Cupid, who will be the Democrat nominee on the ballot in November. So that's the target right there, to get in November competing with Lisa Cupid and then getting elected chairman.
Larry, I want to thank you. It's a very informative evening. Appreciate it. And we'll do this again.
Thank you very much.